Hello, and welcome to Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri with the Alien Crossfire expansion. This is a Space 4X in the style of the Sid Meier Civilization series. This is, I believe, based off of the Civilization 2 engine, so it's an older game. And I'm going to be doing a Let's Play of this game as the Believer faction. So I'm going to, well, first of all, this particular episode is just going to be an introduction where I briefly talk about what all the 14 factions of the game do. And if you're just interested in gameplay, feel free to skip this, because I'm just going over map settings and all of that. And the actual gameplay will start in the first episode, which will be the next episode. This episode 0 does not count for that. Alright, so making random map. Random map size, standard is usually what I like, but I find that in these games, in Civ games in general, large maps just tend to take forever to play. With Alpha Centauri, it's actually not as bad, I find, and also on standard, the standard seems to be a lot smaller than standard in other games, so you end up spawning right next to another player. So I'm going to go large to give myself a little bit more space. Difficulty, I'm going to be playing on Transcend. Compared to other Civ games, I feel like difficulty is relatively easy in this game, because, well, it is a 4X, so the AI probably cheats on the higher difficulties. When it comes to Transcend, a lot of the difficulty is actually the environmental stuff, so you have a lot of happiness issues with your citizens, for example. And this affects the AI as well. So playing on the higher difficulties actually slows the AI down a little bit, which is kind of funny. We'll be going with that. We're going to be playing mostly standard rules, but I'm going to be changing one thing, which is this do or die. By default, it is off. I'm turning it on. So we have our 5 victory types enabled: Transcendence, Conquest. Transcendence is tech victory. Basically, Conquest, kill everybody. Diplomatic victory is to become governor of planet by getting the most votes. Economic victory, you can corner the global energy market if you get enough money to pay to mind control the entire planet all at once, basically. You can win that way. And cooperative victory, which probably won't matter too much, but if you are allied with a bunch of other players, then you don't have to eliminate them in order to do conquest. Do or die, don't restart eliminated players. I'm turning this on because it's really annoying when the AI, you take out an AI player, but then their leader escapes on an escape pod and starts somewhere else on the map randomly. Not, like, just at that point the player is completely irrelevant to the game. They're not going to win at that point. It's just really annoying to have to keep hunting them down if you're trying to go for a conquest victory, for example. Which I might do. I haven't thought about that yet. We'll just see how it goes, but do or die is kind of annoying to not have on, so I want a player who's eliminated to be gone. That's why we're doing that. The rest of this is all default. We're just going to leave it as is. So world map is not visible, and we cannot choose our research. We just kind of choose a general field of study, and we get tech related to that field of study, more or less. Alright, factions. There are 7 factions in this game, plus 7 factions in the expansion. I'm going to be playing, even though I am playing the expansion, I'm only going to have the original 7 factions in the game. That's because I think the ideological spread between these factions is really nice. The AI in this game does not play to win, they play to spread their ideology. So based on your social engineering choices that you make throughout the game, you can have certain players love you or hate you based on those choices. And with this particular spread of factions, you're pretty much guaranteed to be having a couple of the computers in a hostile role, which makes things interesting. You can't be friends with everybody. So now I'm going to briefly... so that's basically everything that you need to know for what my playthrough is going to be. I'm now going to talk about the 14 factions. I'm not going to go in detail over every single little modifier, but I am going to talk briefly about the playstyle, what makes them different, and what their ideological stance is. Before I get into that, I'm going to briefly mention I did say I was going to play the Lord's Believers. I looked at about an hour, I spent about an hour on YouTube looking at other LPs of this game, in particular from a bunch of the other strategy gaming channels, and the general consensus seemed to be that Gaia Stepdaughters and University of Planet were the 2 most popular factions. And Lord's Believers is a faction that most people seem to dislike for various reasons. And so I thought, you know, it would be good to show off the Believers, because they're actually quite a bit of fun to play. They're one of my favorite factions. So it's a good excuse to play them. Alright, so going from the top, going over the 14 factions. Gaia Stepdaughters, the eco-terrorists, or the environmentalists, but they really do play as eco-terrorists. They specialize in mindworm combat, capturing the native life of the planet in order to engage in psionic battles with their opponents. This is particularly interesting because psionics in this game always has a 3-to-2 ratio in favor of the attacker. This is modified by things like planet. The higher your planet rating is, the more bonuses you get, and morale. The higher your morale is, the better you're able to deal with psionic combat. It is not modified by technology, so no matter how high-tech our units get, psionic combat still plays out based on planet and morale. So that's interesting. So this particular faction, yeah, that's kind of their main focus, is to use a whole bunch of mindworms to take control of, well, not take control of, but to conquer people or to defend yourselves in that way. Human Hive. This is a collectivist faction. Collectivist police state. They're good at growing and building stuff. The economy's not the best. This is probably the most powerful of the default 7 factions in the game. Certainly it's the one that the AI is the best at playing. And I used to play one-on-one with 5 AI opponents in the game with my father in this game, and we found that we're pretty evenly matched for the most part, but we'd always play as a random faction, and whoever ended up as the Hive would win when somebody was Hive. When nobody was Hive, we actually had pretty close games, but whoever was Hive would just kind of steamroll everything. So that's kind of how I feel about that. They're the most powerful faction in the game. As far as the base factions go, University of Planet, the other popular choice. Because of research, everybody loves their research. Unsurprisingly, University gets attacked faster than everyone else. That's sort of their big thing. They also have an additional happiness penalty, which, especially on the higher difficulties, can be quite punishing. Morgan Industries, the capitalist faction of the game. +1 economy is a huge bonus. It doesn't look like, they'd only get the +1 to 1 stat over here, but this is actually a really significant bonus. You get so much money playing as the Morgans, as the Morganites. Not so great at combat though, and you need to have complex early. So this is a building that lifts a limit on your base size. Normally you can go up to size 7, but you can only go up to size 4 as the Morganites, which can cripple your early game growth quite a bit, because it can take a while to get to that tech. Another thing about money is that spying in this game, using probe teams, that costs money to use those actions. So having an economy helps you with your espionage type stuff as well. Spartans, the militaristic faction of the game, they really like guns. Good at combat, better at using units to police their citizens, worse production. This faction, probably one of the less interesting ones in my opinion. All they really do is fight, and they fight really well, so if that's what you're doing, that's fine. I mean, they're not bad, it's just not my preferred playstyle, because I find that they really only kind of do one thing. Lord's Believers. -2 research. This is probably why people don't like them. That's essentially a 20% research penalty, and if you end up choosing a fundamentalist government, which I'm going to be doing, that's an additional 20%, so you're looking at 40% less science than anyone else. And I'm hoping to demonstrate with my playthrough that you don't really need a lot of science in order to do well in this game. They do get a 25% bonus when attacking. That's just always really good. A bonus to probe and support as well, so I mean they can support large armies. They're decently good at the spy type espionage actions as well. So they're quite an interesting faction. And Peacekeepers. Extra talent for every 4 citizens. This is a happiness bonus, so you can grow faster. Hab complex exceed by 2, so you can go up to size 9 instead of size 7, so again, more growth. Especially on the highest difficulty, where every citizen beyond the first is unhappy by default. Having a happy citizen for every 4 instead of an unhappy is a huge boost to your happiness. So this is a very good faction on the highest difficulty. You also get double votes if you're going for diplomatic victory with planetary governor and supreme leader. So they're good at that side of things as well. Those are the 7 default factions. I will be playing the Believers. Let's look at the 7 expansion factions, though, since we're going through these. These factions generally, I would say, are more powerful, and also the balance is a little bit weird in terms of ideology. I've had games, especially if you go all random, where you just mix all the factions together. I've had games where pretty much all the factions were in agreement on a lot of things, which is can be a little bit disappointing. Anyway, Cybernetic Consciousness basically believes in cybernetics, transhumanism, I suppose, making people to be better than they otherwise would be. So efficiency is an economic boost, research, more of that, more tech, pretty good. They also get tech steal and base capture, so they're kind of like a how do I describe this? They're very similar to the university faction, but I feel like they're a university faction with growth bonuses. I know they have a growth penalty here, but with the efficiency, they can expand more. I don't know, I find them just generally to be a superior university, basically. Nautilus Pirates. Another fan favorite, just because they start in the ocean with a naval base, which is quite a bit different. They also get a bunch of bonuses to sea units and production from sea tiles as well. So great if you want to play as an aquatic faction doing something quite a bit different than any other faction in the game. Anybody can go on the water, but they start on the water and get bonuses to it. So that's pretty cool. Free drones. This is your socialist utopia. Bonus to industry, penalty to research. Also, the -1 drones in every base is a weaker happiness bonus than the UN Peacekeepers, but it's still nice. It actually kicks in earlier, but it only kicks in once at the very beginning, like when you first build a base, and it doesn't help when your bases get really big. So it helps you if you want to have a bunch of small bases, though. They also have this weird modifier where revolting bases tend to join drones, so if you're not playing as the drones and your base is in revolt for long enough, it might just flip to this faction if they're in the game. They're actually surprisingly fun. Like their abilities didn't look all that interesting, but playing as them, I actually quite enjoyed them as well. Data Angels, I feel like, is probably the weakest of the expansion factions. They are all in on the cybercrime stuff, so spying on people, cheaper probe team actions, covert ops centers, basically free experience for your probe teams. So your spies are super good as this faction. You also have this other cool ability where if they've infiltrated 3 other factions, which they're gonna basically infiltrate everybody that they meet. If 3 other people that you've met have a tech, they just get it without having to research it. So that's kind of neat. Cult of Planet, maybe the weirdest of the expansion factions. They get bonuses to mindworms. The brood pit means that they can train mindworms that are stronger than other mindworms would normally be, and mindworms do double police duty. So the citizens, fear and reverence for native life helps keep the drones in line. Mindworms helping with that. I believe they also start with a mindworm. They're an interesting faction. So they're kind of like Gaians. I don't want to say they're better than the Gaians. They're very similar. And then you got the 2 alien factions. These 2 factions are just straight up overpowered. They are significantly better than any other faction in the game. However, there are a few trade-offs that come with that, so I'm basically going to ignore these little details or whatever. I'm kind of going to cover them both at the same time. Caretakers get a 25% defensive combat boost. Usurpers get a 25% offensive combat boost. Aside from that, all of this stuff is basically the same. So if you're playing with blind research, they still get to do directed research anyway. They get to see which text they're researching and get to pick what they want instead of it being random. They also start with a scan of the planet's surface, so even if you have that disabled, which I do, they're still going to start with the map explored from the start. Free recycling tanks and free energy grid in every base is just free growth, free production, free money in every base that they build. Pretty good. Pretty good. In fact, the free recycling tanks is basically a 50% bonus to food industry and energy right off the start. It's pretty significant. It's less significant later, but I mean, early game snowballs is a 4x, so it's insanely good. And again, these two factions all have these bonuses. Start with an extra combat unit, and also an extra colony pod or settler, so that's, again, really good. Disadvantages. Why are the aliens not... I mean, I've said not far and away the best. They are far and away the best factions in the game. However, they have a couple of disadvantages. The first is that they start with diplomatic awareness of each other, and they start at war with each other. This is why it's alien crossfire. They also do not get to join planetary governance stuff. So the 5 human factions all meet each other. They can start having votes to do things, and, you know, diplomatic victory and all that, but also other stuff. And the alien factions don't get to know about that. So if the humans decide that for some reason they want to melt the polar ice caps and raise the sea level, well, they can just do that without any input from the aliens. There's also a few other interesting quirks about that. I think as far as atrocities go, there isn't concern about that. So normally if you commit an atrocity, everybody kind of hates you for it. But I think humans and aliens committing atrocities on each other don't incur that kind of diplomatic penalty. Could be wrong about that, but I believe that's the case. I don't know. I don't actually play with aliens in the game that much, but I believe that that is the case. Also, the aliens obviously cannot win a diplomatic victory, but instead of that, they have an alternate tech victory, which is to build a portal back to their homeworld to bring in the homeworld fleet and just basically instantly win that way. So those are the 14 factions of the game. Again, we'll be playing Lord's Believers, and I will start with that in the next episode. I will see you then. Oh, and one final point. Getting this game to record was a huge pain. There's all sorts of issues with that. In fact, you're going to have to see me save the game and exit every single time because I can't actually access any of my recording options while I'm in game. So there's that. Anyway, I will see you next time.